From the outside, Ava James's life gleamed with the kind of serenity that could inspire envy. Her charming brick Tudor home, nestled in an ivy-draped cul-de-sac just outside Charleston, had the kind of storybook quality that made people believe in fairy tales. It had been passed down from her grandmother, a woman whose warm hands and stronger will had built more than just the garden walls and sunlit breakfast nook. It had built a legacy of endurance. Ava clung to that legacy like a compass. It made her feel grounded, safe. And then there was Daniel. Her husband of 7 years, Daniel Archer, was the very image of a reformed bad boy turned responsible man. With his salt and pepper stubble, quiet confidence, and easy laugh that made waitresses blush and friends lean in closer, he had the kind of charisma that could sell ice in winter. To Ava, he was the second half of a hard-earned peace. He had entered her life at a moment when she'd stopped believing in love and convinced her otherwise with candlelit dinners, forehead kisses, and gentle promises whispered in the quiet of their shared bed. But lately, something in Daniel had shifted. It started small, barely perceptible changes. He grew distracted, his eyes flickering over his phone more than her face. He lingered in the garage longer than usual. His jokes had a sharpness to them, like rust under polish. Then came the talk of money. "Just a little refinancing," he said one night, lounging on the couch in his robe, swirling a glass of bourbon. The fire crackled. Ava, curled up beside him, looked at him over the rim of her teacup. "Refinancing?" she echoed, puzzled. "But we're fine." "It's just smart," Daniel replied smoothly, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "Interest rates are dropping. We could take some equity out, maybe redo the guest bathroom. Finally build that sunroom you wanted. I've already spoken with a broker." It wasn't the first time Daniel made financial decisions without consulting her fully, but he had always framed it as protection, love even, sparing her the stress, handling the heavy stuff. And truthfully, Ava had let him. Her trust in Daniel had always been total, and it had cost her nothing. Yet, she nodded slowly that night, distracted by his warmth and the comforting lie of routine. But deep down, something felt off. The next few weeks were riddled with small, unease-inducing details she tried to dismiss. A manila envelope hastily shoved into a drawer when she entered the room. A strange caller ID on his phone that he waved off as telemarketers. A subtle but unmistakable shift in the energy between them. Daniel seemed jittery, as if he were always bracing for a conversation that never came. Ava found herself staring longer at the house when she came home from work, as if it too could sense something brewing. The ivy looked overgrown. The shutters hadn't been cleaned. There was a heaviness in the air. And always Daniel's hands, always moving. Tapping, twitching, scrolling. Still, Ava clung to the story of their life. The Sunday brunches, the wine-stained anniversary cards in her drawer, the way he still called her sunshine in the mornings. She couldn't see that the storm had already started. And soon, her dream life would become a haunting memory. Because while Ava was still clinging to love, Daniel was already cashing it in. It happened on a Tuesday. Ava James would remember the smell of honeysuckle in the breeze that morning, the way the sunlight warmed the hardwood beneath her bare feet as she sipped her coffee and fed crumbs to the sparrows gathering by the back porch. The day felt ordinary, deceptively so. She even hummed as she locked the front door, kissed Daniel goodbye, and headed off to work. By the time she returned, everything she knew had been erased. It began with the car in the driveway, an unfamiliar black SUV blocking her usual spot. Her brows knit together, confused. There were voices, too, unfamiliar and muffled, carrying from inside the house. It wasn't until she reached the front steps that she saw it. A yellowed legal notice taped crookedly across the front door. Sheriff's Notice of Eviction. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, eyes skimming the bold, heartless text. Her name wasn't even on the top line. Daniel Archer, it read. Former owner. Former? Ava staggered back, chest tightening. That's when the door opened. A man in a neon green moving company shirt emerged, holding a box labeled Master Bath. He gave her a brief glance, clearly assuming she was just another curious neighbor. Behind him, a young couple stood in the foyer. The woman was pregnant. The man was already pulling plastic off the leather couch Ava had napped on just the week before. "Excuse me," Ava stepped forward, her voice rising in panic. "What are you doing in my house?" The couple exchanged a look. The husband approached cautiously. "Ma'am, we bought this place 2 weeks ago. Closing was finalized on Friday. We have the deed, the key. Everything's legal." No, there must be a mistake," Ava said, her voice barely above a whisper now. Her heart slammed in her chest. She looked down at the notice again. The words blurred, her throat dried up. "This is my house. This is my grandmother's house. You can't just—" But the man was already stepping back, pulling out his phone, prepared to call someone. Authorities, maybe. Ava turned and fled. She dialed Daniel again and again as she sat in her car parked down the street, fingers trembling on the screen. Straight to voicemail. She checked her texts. Nothing since that morning, just a casual, "Have a good day, sunshine." By nightfall, she realized he wasn't answering because he was gone. Inside the glove box, she found a crumpled envelope addressed to her in Daniel's handwriting. She ripped it open with desperate fingers. "Ava, I'm sorry, things got complicated. I never meant to hurt you. I'll explain everything soon. Just know I didn't have a choice." "Daniel? No choice?" Ava dropped the letter, her breath catching like a sob in her throat. She sat frozen in the driver's seat, watching through blurry eyes as the lights in her house flicked on, illuminating strangers in rooms that once held her laughter, her memories, her life. Later, through a blur of disbelief, she would discover the extent of Daniel's betrayal. He had forged her signature on the selling documents, navigated the entire transaction behind her back, and disappeared the moment the deal closed. It was premeditated. Cold. Clean. Everything they had built together, stolen with a pen and a lie. Ava wasn't just locked out of her home, she had been erased from it. And Daniel Archer, her husband, her supposed protector, had become a ghost. Ava pressed her forehead to the steering wheel, grief and rage rising like a tide. The dream was dead. But she wasn't. Not yet. While Ava's world crumbled, Daniel Archer was sipping champagne in a penthouse suite overlooking the Atlantic. He hadn't disappeared, he had escaped. 300 miles away, in Miami's Art Deco district, Daniel leaned back in a cream leather armchair, the sleeves of his linen shirt rolled just enough to expose his designer watch. Across from him, a woman barely in her 20s twirled her finger through her freshly highlighted hair, giggling at something he'd just said. Her name was Sienna, an aspiring lifestyle influencer who called Daniel her silver fox on social media and boasted to her followers about manifesting abundance. She had no idea he was married. No idea her new boyfriend had used forged documents, stolen trust, and dirty money to finance the ocean view condo she now called their love nest. Daniel watched her through hooded eyes, sipping his drink. For a man who once claimed he despised liars, he was becoming one with frightening ease. It had started innocently enough, an online poker game, a few lucky wins, a rush of adrenaline that reminded him of his youth, but it spiraled fast. The wins vanished, replaced by losses. By the time he realized he was in too deep, his accounts were bleeding and shadowy men were making threats that didn't come with second warnings. So he made a choice. He looked at Ava, still trusting, still sweet, and saw a solution. The house, her grandmother's house, paid off, prime location, market booming. It was the easiest bait he'd ever bitten. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd fix it somehow, that once he'd repaid his debts, he'd make it right. He even imagined surprising Ava with a newer, bigger house once the smoke cleared. But somewhere between the forged signature and the payout, Daniel stopped pretending it was temporary. Because Sienna was young, beautiful, easy. She didn't know about his mortgage lies or the tension that simmered in the final months of his marriage. She saw him as successful, exciting, a fresh chapter, one he convinced himself he deserved. Meanwhile, Ava's name was being dragged through bureaucracy. She spent her days in a blur of courthouse lines and voicemail prompts, trying to make sense of paperwork she never signed and mortgage transfers she never authorized. Her calls to Daniel went unanswered. Her emails bounced back. Even his social media accounts had been wiped clean, ghosted into nothing, until she found the photos. A friend forwarded her a link to an Instagram story. There was Daniel, poolside, shirt unbuttoned, holding Sienna's waist as she squealed over a champagne bottle with the caption, #new beginnings, #power couple vibes. Ava's hands went cold. Her stomach turned. Her husband hadn't vanished in shame. He had run away with her life and was flaunting it under a South Florida sun. And yet, even with the betrayal laid bare, Ava refused to let it break her. Yes, he had taken the house. Yes, he had stolen her trust. But what Daniel didn't know was that Ava wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Ava James had always been a believer in boundaries, the kind of woman who kept her grief private, her triumphs humble, and her circles small. But betrayal has a way of shattering even the thickest emotional walls. After weeks of phone calls, legal dead ends, and mounting anxiety, Ava knew she needed help. Not from lawyers, at least not yet, but from someone who knew how to find truth hidden in shadows. Someone who knew how to dig, someone who had once been family. Enter Lila James. Lila wasn't just Ava's older sister. She was a firestorm in boots. 5 years estranged after a brutal argument over their father's inheritance, the sisters hadn't spoken since their last Christmas together, when Lila stormed out of the house and slammed the door on everything that had once bonded them. But Lila had always lived in extremes, unforgiving, unapologetic, unafraid. Now Ava needed those very qualities. She found Lila running a small but ruthless private investigation agency in Savannah, under a new last name and an even sharper tongue. "I thought you were too classy to come crawling," Lila said flatly as she leaned against her desk, arms folded, eyes unreadable. "I didn't come to crawl," Ava replied. "I came to fight." That was all it took. The sisters' reunion wasn't warm, it was strategic. Lila saw the pain in Ava's face, but didn't console her. Instead, she reached for her laptop and started pulling property records, like a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Over the following days, the sisters dug in. While Ava pored through old bank statements and scanned copies of legal filings, Lila tracked Daniel's movements with clinical precision. His aliases, his sudden relocation, even the luxury car he'd leased with the proceeds from the sale. But that was just the beginning. The real bombshells came when Lila hacked her way, legally of course, into the notary records tied to the forged deed. A name popped up. Elise Grafton. Ava froze. Elise was her cousin. The same cousin who toasted her at her wedding, cried at their grandmother's funeral, and once swore she'd take a bullet for Ava. She was the notary who authenticated the sale, Lila said, pointing at the screen. "Your signature, witnessed, verified, except you never signed it." Ava's breath left her body. Her mouth went dry. But it didn't stop there. Another name surfaced. Claire Yates, Ava's best friend since college. A woman who had shared heartbreaks, baby showers, and endless wine nights. Claire had referred Daniel to her real estate friend when he floated the idea of refinancing months ago. That agent? Marcus Lang, a man Ava barely remembered, except for the offhand comment he once made at a dinner party about how her home was wasted on a sentimental girl. Each name hit Ava like a new betrayal, slicing deeper with every cut. Her circle had become a trap. Lila scribbled down the connections on a whiteboard, drawing red lines between names, phone records, transaction dates. What emerged looked less like a coincidence and more like a conspiracy. "You trusted too many people," Lila muttered. "They think you're soft, but they forget what James women are made of." Ava didn't cry. Not anymore. Her home was gone. Her marriage had been a lie. Her friendships were ashes. But with Lila at her side, Ava was no longer searching for closure. She was preparing for war. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a conspiracy, woven by the very people Ava James once considered her innermost circle. Each name on Lila's whiteboard had once carried warmth, comfort, or shared history. Now they burned like brands of betrayal. Ava stared at the names for hours that night, lit by the sterile glow of a desk lamp in Lila's downtown office. Elise, Claire, Marcus, Daniel. 4 names, 4 daggers. But Ava didn't flinch anymore. She sharpened them. The first confrontation was with Elise. Her cousin answered the door in yoga pants and a tattered hoodie, her face tightening the moment she saw Ava. "Hey! I was just heading out," Elise stammered. Ava stepped into the doorway, blocking her path. "Then this won't take long. I know you notarized the sale. My signature was forged. You vouched for it." Elise's smile faltered. "Ava, I didn't. I thought you knew. Daniel said you were just too busy to come in. He brought papers, your ID." "And a wad of cash?" Ava asked coolly. "How much was it, Elise? Enough to cover your car payment? Your rent?" Elise's eyes dropped to the floor. "I trusted you," Ava whispered. "And you turned my life into a paycheck." A single tear slipped down Elise's cheek, but Ava didn't stay to watch it fall. She left without another word. Next was Claire. Ava didn't call or text. She showed up at the cafe where Claire worked part-time after her divorce. It was the same place they used to gossip over lattes, trading stories about bad dates and dream vacations. When Claire saw her, she froze mid-order, her smile melting into panic. "Ava," she said breathlessly, "what are you doing here?" "You referred Daniel to Marcus Lang," Ava said. "You told him I'd be open to refinancing." Claire paled. "I didn't know what he was planning, I swear. He said it was just a loan, that you both agreed." "You knew we were having problems," Ava cut in, "and you still gave him the match and pointed him to the gasoline." Claire opened her mouth, then shut it. Her silence spoke louder than any defense. "You were supposed to be my best friend," Ava said softly. "Instead, you handed him the tools to destroy me." Claire didn't chase her as Ava walked away. She just stood there, trembling behind the pastry counter as the past burned down around them. Then came Marcus Lang. Ava didn't confront him alone. Lila insisted on joining, wearing a trench coat and that wicked glint in her eye that Ava now recognized as the scent of battle. Marcus was smooth, even in the face of fury. "It was a clean deal," he said, swirling whiskey in a glass as if they were discussing bad weather. "Daniel had all the right paperwork." "Forged paperwork," Lila snapped, placing a stack of printed emails and financial records on his desk. "You facilitated fraud. That's a felony." His bravado slipped. "You always wanted that house," Ava said. "You told me I didn't deserve it. You let your ego help Daniel rip it away." Marcus tried to laugh, but it rang hollow. "You were just playing house in that place. You had no idea what you were sitting on." "Now I do," Ava said, stepping closer, voice like steel. "And I'm coming for everything you took from me." One by one, her circle was dismantled. Not with screaming or revenge, but with facts, resolve, and a growing storm of righteous fury. Yet through it all, one question remained unanswered, one piece still missing from the puzzle. Who had bought the house? Because none of them had. Not Elise, not Claire, not even Marcus. The name on the deed led to a shell company. The signature was clean. The trail, cold. But Ava was done being blindsided. Whoever bought her house was about to feel the full force of a woman rebuilt from ruin, and she was done knocking politely. The house was gone, but Ava James wasn't. Now she had names, proof, and the unwavering support of a sister who would become her shield. But as the legal dominoes began to fall, Elise's license flagged for review, Marcus threatened with disbarment, Claire cast out from polite company. One question haunted Ava's every thought. Who had bought the house? The transaction papers pointed to a company called Harbor Point Holdings, a limited liability corporation registered in Delaware, a state notorious for hiding ownership behind layers of legal smoke. No CEO, no signatories, just a P.O. box, a fax number, and a generic email domain. Lila sat across from Ava at her office desk, chewing the cap of her pen. "I've seen this before," she said. "Shell companies like this are built to bury the real buyer. Could be anyone with enough money and reason to stay hidden." Ava folded her arms tightly across her chest. What kind of person hides behind a wall of lawyers to buy a family home out from under someone else? "The kind that knows you," Lila replied. "Knows your history, knows exactly what that house means." That night, Ava couldn't sleep. Every creak in her borrowed apartment sounded like the ghost of a memory stolen. She thought about the breakfast nook where her grandmother used to hum while slicing peaches. About the squeaky stair she never got around to fixing, the faint heart Daniel had once carved into the inside of her closet, now an artifact belonging to a stranger. Or worse, someone she knew. By morning, Lila had a lead. "I found a transfer file," she said, eyes bright with caffeine and adrenaline. "It's from a smaller holding firm that transferred the deed to Harbor Point 3 days before your eviction. That's unusual, like someone was hiding the trail mid-transaction." Ava leaned forward. "Who was it?" "Siren Holdings," Lila replied. "Registered under an alias, but one of the administrative contacts is a name I've seen before, back when I was digging into Mom." Ava froze. Their mother, Miriam James, had been presumed dead for 25 years. The narrative was that she drowned in a boating accident off Cape Cod. Ava remembered being just a child, sitting on the back porch in her Sunday dress while men with solemn voices whispered things like tragedy and closure. Lila never believed it. Ava never questioned it, until now. "She's alive?" Ava said, her voice cracking. "I don't know," Lila admitted, "but someone connected to her. Someone using the same signature she once used on old banking documents is behind this deal. And if that's true, then this whole thing? Daniel, the house, everything, it may not have been random." Ava sat back, numb. Her entire life had been built atop one painful assumption, that her mother was gone. Her absence had shaped her, haunted her, and left a crater of unanswered questions. Now, that crater might hold more secrets than she was ready for. Still, one thing was clear. Someone from her past, someone with ties deep enough to mimic the dead, wanted her house. Wanted her. And they'd gone through Daniel to get it. Ava's voice was barely a whisper. "Why now?" Lila met her eyes. "Let's find out." The room fell silent as Lila slid the final document across the table. Ava's hands hovered over the paper, hesitant, trembling. At the top of the notarized deed transfer form, beneath layers of fake business names and shell company gibberish, was a single signature, M. James. Not Miriam. Not her full name. Just an initial. But Ava knew that handwriting as surely as she knew her own. The curve of the J, the tilt of the final stroke. She had stared at it as a child, tracing over notes tucked into her lunchboxes. "Love you always, Mom." Back then, she had read those notes like prayers, until one day, they simply stopped. Ava lifted her eyes, voice low. "Are you telling me she's alive?" Lila nodded grimly. "And she's the one who bought your house." It didn't make sense. Ava had mourned Miriam for 25 years. Her disappearance off the Cape had been tragic, confusing, and final. Or so she believed. But in truth, there had never been a confirmed body. Just a storm, a wrecked boat, and a father who drank more heavily after the search was called off. A father whose rage was quiet but constant, who called Miriam's independence selfish, and her laughter too loud. A father who erased her mother's presence from their lives with terrifying ease. Her clothes donated, her photos burned, her name unspoken by year's end. Ava had been taught to grieve. Lila had chosen to remember. "She ran," Lila said quietly. "I knew it. I told you. I told everyone." And no one listened. She faked her death to get away from Dad. Ava swallowed hard, memories crashing over her like a rising tide. But why now? Why the house? Because that house was the one piece of her life she left behind, Lila said. It was her safe place. Grandma left it to you. She probably thought it would stay in the family forever. Mom must have found out about Daniel, about the sale, and she stepped in. Ava couldn't speak. Her pulse roared in her ears. Just days earlier, the thought of Daniel stealing her home had consumed her. But now the betrayal was tangled with something more profound, a mystery reaching across decades, unburying trauma. Ava had long since learned to pack neatly into boxes. Lila stood and slid her a slip of paper. "Here's an address. She's using a new name, Margaret Hulston. Bought a cottage 2 hours north. She lives alone, doesn't leave town. I don't think she knows we found her." The drive was surreal. Ava barely spoke. The wooded roads blurred as memories of childhood laughter, bedtime songs, and then silence, all swirled inside her. The unanswered questions grew louder with every mile. Why had her mother abandoned her? Why had she never reached out? And why now? When Ava reached the modest stone cottage nestled near a lake, her heart slammed against her ribs. The front door opened before she could even knock. Miriam, Margaret, stood there. Her once dark hair had faded to silver, tied back in a braid like she used to wear in the garden. Her eyes, those same steel-gray eyes Ava saw in her own reflection, filled with tears the moment they locked with Ava's. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, voice hoarse. "I've waited so long for this." Ava stood frozen, her knees nearly buckled. "You're alive," she whispered. "I'm sorry," Miriam choked out. "I had to disappear, for my safety. And yours." The dam inside Ava cracked. "I needed you," she cried, "when Dad turned cold. When he told me you left us." "I never stopped watching over you," Miriam said, stepping forward. "And when I saw what Daniel was doing, I couldn't stay away anymore." The embrace was tentative, shaking, but real. 2 decades of silence ended in a single moment of trembling forgiveness. But Ava wasn't ready to forgive Daniel. Not yet. He had unknowingly awakened a force greater than betrayal. He had resurrected a woman thought dead, and now Ava had her mother, her truth, and a mission. This war wasn't over. Now, it was personal. The story should ended at the lakeside cottage, with a long-lost mother, a tearful reunion, and a home reclaimed. But Ava James had learned something in her journey through loss, betrayal, and revelation. Survival wasn't the end of the story. Reinvention was. Within a week of discovering Miriam, now Margaret, and confronting the tangled web of her past, Ava made a decision. She would no longer be the woman life happened to. She would become the one who defined what happened next, and it began with a single phone call to a journalist named Eden Clare. Eden had been a rising star in the local media, known for exposing corruption in real estate and finance. Ava had once dismissed reporters as vultures. Now she saw them as weapons. She handed Eden a thick folder, full of forged documents, financial transfers, notarized lies, and the heart-stopping reveal of a woman who had faked her death to escape abuse, only to return and rescue her daughter from another predator. By the time Eden finished reading, she looked up, wide-eyed. "This story is going to burn down half the city," she whispered. "Good," Ava said. "Light the match." The article dropped like a bomb. The House That Lies Built, How a Charleston Wife Was Betrayed by Her Inner Circle and Rescued by a Ghost. The headline ran front page on every digital platform in the region, trending on social media within hours. Readers devoured the tale of Ava's stolen home, her fraudulent husband, the criminal conspiracy surrounding her, and the miraculous reappearance of a mother presumed dead for 25 years. The public couldn't get enough. TV networks called. Podcasts reached out. One reality TV producer even asked if she'd consider a docuseries. Ava declined most offers, but she used the attention wisely. She launched her own property rehabilitation firm, Second House Rising. Her first project? The very home Daniel had stolen. Miriam, now legally re-established as herself, had transferred ownership back to Ava. And Ava, rather than moving back in, gutted it. Top to bottom. She rebuilt it with purpose. Wide-open windows, sun-drenched interiors, a library instead of a master bedroom. The heart of the home was no longer the kitchen, but a quiet writing room, lined with photos of the women in her family. Then she sold it for triple what Daniel had made. The funds launched her empire. Within months, Ava had acquired 4 more distressed properties, flipped them, and donated a portion of each profit to women's shelters, especially those supporting survivors of domestic and financial abuse. The public hailed her as an icon of resilience. But not everything was for show. Privately, Ava made sure every one of her betrayers paid. Marcus Lang's license was revoked after an anonymous tip about his involvement in other shady deals. Elise was fined and barred from practicing as a notary. Claire's name was scrubbed from the social circuit, shunned for her silence. Ava never confronted them again. She didn't have to. The city did it for her. But the one she watched most closely, quietly from a distance, was Daniel. As the headlines praised Ava's rise, Daniel's name vanished from the narrative. His glory days, his sleek wardrobe, charming smile, high-end mistresses dissolved in silence. And Ava? She smiled for the cameras, gave eloquent speeches, and used every opportunity to teach one lesson. You cannot steal from a woman who remembers who she is. But beneath that smile lived a fire, because while the world cheered her redemption, Ava James was still writing her revenge. Daniel Archer once thrived in tailored suits and whispered deals, the kind of man who charmed a room before he ever said a word. His smile had once bought him favors, invitations, and forgiveness. But charisma doesn't pay debts, and charm doesn't feed you when you're sleeping in your car. The fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, embarrassingly so. A long, humiliating unraveling that exposed him, thread by thread. After the expose on Ava broke, Daniel's name was nowhere to be found in the article, but everyone knew. Friends stopped answering his calls. Former business partners ghosted him. Even his favorite bartender gave him a cold, uncomfortable nod instead of a free drink. His accounts had already been drained, first by his gambling debts, then by the mistress who had once called him the best thing that ever happened to her. That same mistress had vanished overnight, taking with her the last $10,000 he had hidden in a secret account under a fake business name. He reported the theft. The cops laughed. A little taste of your own medicine, huh? With no money, no home, and no allies, Daniel tried to reclaim what little dignity he had left. He returned to the office of a former real estate colleague to ask about a job, any job. Daniel, I can't have your name on a single piece of company paper, the man said quietly. People don't want to be associated with you. Honestly, neither do I. So Daniel tried another path. A motel in a forgotten part of town, then a couch at a friend's, then the back seat of his Lexus, parked behind a laundromat where no one would see the man who once toasted champagne on rooftops, now brushing his teeth in a gas station bathroom. His phone buzzed only with spam. The silence was deafening. Each night he lay beneath his thin blanket, scrolling through headlines about Ava, her smiling face, her gleaming new projects, her words at a charity gala, I was stripped of everything I thought made me safe. What I learned is that strength isn't about keeping a perfect life intact, it's about rebuilding one that's entirely yours." The crowd applauded. Daniel flinched. There she was, dazzling in crimson, reborn from ashes he had lit with his own hand. He had stolen her home and shattered her peace, thinking she would fall. But instead, she had risen. Every billboard he passed on the edge of town reminded him of her triumph. Ava James, real estate visionary, her logo adorned construction fences. Her voice came through the radio as she gave interviews about housing equity and resilience. Daniel, meanwhile, couldn't get a loan approval for a storage unit. At his lowest, he pawned his watch, the one he once wore to Ava's gallery opening, when he was still her hero. The clerk offered him barely enough for a week of meals. He took it. And still, Ava haunted him. Not in hate, but in indifference. That was the worst part. She never came looking for him, never raged, never retaliated. She simply erased him. And it worked. Daniel realized then he hadn't just lost the house, or the money, or his reputation. He had lost Ava. The one person who had believed in him, loved him enough to give him everything. Now she was on magazine covers. And he was parked behind a dumpster, begging for coins with a face he could no longer charm into trust. But Daniel wasn't done. Not yet. One final thing gnawed at him. He needed to see her, not to hurt her, but to beg, and maybe, just maybe, be seen again. The house stood tall now. Clean lines, modern architecture, bathed in golden light from a warm Carolina sunset. It wasn't the same house Daniel Archer had stolen. No, that house was gone, gutted, and transformed, just like the woman who used to live in it. Ava James had rebuilt everything, and Daniel had watched it all unfold from the fringes of the city, filthy, hungry, and invisible. Her name had become synonymous with resilience. Her image was everywhere, sleek in a power suit, smiling confidently beside real estate investors, walking red carpets with her mother on one arm and her sister on the other. Daniel had waited until he had nothing left to lose, not pride, not comfort, not even the last shred of self-respect. He approached the house at dusk, unshaven, coat too thin for the season, eyes sunken from sleepless nights spent in parking lots and shelters. His car had been towed days ago, his belongings stuffed into a garbage bag slung over one shoulder. He had rehearsed what to say, over and over. But when the door opened and Ava appeared, all words left him. She looked at him with no trace of fear, no hatred, not even anger, just stillness. She wore a simple black sweater and soft jeans, her hair pulled back in a low bun. There was no makeup, no entourage, no armor, just Ava, as she was now, stronger, quieter, unshakable. Daniel swallowed. His throat was dry. "Ava," he rasped, voice barely recognizable. I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I had to come. I had to try." She didn't answer, didn't move. He took a step forward. "I lost everything," he said. "The money, the people. Sienna left, my business is gone, I'm living on couches and alleyways. I thought I could fix things. I thought I was doing it for us, but I lied. To you, to myself." He looked down at his shoes. They were frayed, soaked from a puddle he'd stepped in hours earlier. He took a breath and looked up again, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry, Ava. I'm so sorry for what I did. I can't undo it. I need you to know I regret it. I regret all of it." Still, she said nothing. The only sound between them was the faint rustling of wind in the trees. He searched her face, looking for softness, recognition, anything. A flicker of something passed through her eyes. Then, she spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, even kind. "I forgave you," she said, "the moment I stopped loving you." The words didn't slam. They sliced. Daniel's lips parted, but nothing came out. Ava stepped back, hand on the edge of the door. "I hope you get the help you need, I really do." She gave him one last look. Not of pity, not of warmth, but of finality. Then she closed the door, softly, quietly, permanently. Daniel stood motionless on the front step. He thought maybe he'd cry, or scream, or collapse. But none of that happened. There was just the click of the deadbolt behind him. He turned and walked away into the twilight. And inside, Ava exhaled. The chapter was closed. For good.